On the morning of December the 26th, 2004, the beaches of the Indian Ocean were full of people. It was Boxing Day, a public holiday across much of the world. Families from Europe, Australia, and North America had flown in for Christmas getaways. Local fishermen were already out on the water. Children were playing at the shoreline. The sun was up. The sea was calm. By every measure, it was a perfect morning. At 0:58 local time, the ground beneath the ocean moved. Not trembled, not shifted, moved. A section of the ocean floor the length of California lurched upward by up to 15 meters in under 10 minutes. The earthquake that caused it registered 9.1 on the Richter scale, making it the third largest ever recorded in human history. It released more energy than every nuclear weapon ever detonated, combined. The shaking was so powerful, it altered the rotation of the Earth. Scientists later calculated that the planet's day became 1.26 microseconds shorter. And almost nobody on those beaches knew any of it had happened. The first sign came from the water itself. Along hundreds of kilometers of coastline, the sea began to pull back. Not gently, dramatically. The ocean retreated hundreds of meters in minutes, exposing the seabed, stranding fish, revealing coral reefs that had never seen sunlight. In some places, the water pulled back so far that it looked as if the ocean had simply disappeared. People walked out onto the exposed sand. Some picked up fish. Some took photographs. Some called their families over to look. In a small number of places, someone who understood what was happening began to scream. Then the water came back. Within 2 hours, 227,898 people were dead across 14 countries, the deadliest tsunami in recorded human history. A wave born from a single earthquake had killed people across nearly a third of the planet's surface, from Indonesia to Somalia, from Thailand to South Africa. The terrifying part is not that it happened. The terrifying part is that the conditions that caused it are still in place, and building pressure every single day. To understand whether this can happen again, you have to understand the geology underneath the Indian Ocean. Because the answer to that question does not lie in politics or technology. It lies in the rock. Beneath the seafloor off the western coast of Sumatra runs a structure called the Sunda Megathrust. It is a subduction zone, a place where two of the Earth's tectonic plates meet, and one is forced beneath the other. In this case, the Indo-Australian plate is grinding underneath the Eurasian plate, moving at roughly 6 centimeters per year. That is about the speed at which your fingernails grow. 6 centimeters per year does not sound dangerous, but subduction zones do not release their energy gradually. They lock. The two plates press together with such enormous force that they stick. Stress accumulates over decades, over centuries. The rocks bend, the strain builds, and then, without warning, the fault ruptures and releases everything at once. Geologists call these events megathrust earthquakes. They are the largest earthquakes on Earth. Every single one of the 6 most powerful earthquakes ever recorded was a megathrust event. The one that struck on December 26, 2004 was the most powerful in 40 years. The rupture began near the northern tip of Sumatra and tore northward along the fault at speeds of up to 2.8 kilometers per second. It lasted between 8 and 10 minutes. For context, most major earthquakes are over in under a minute. This one kept going. And going. People in cities hundreds of kilometers from the epicenter felt the ground move for nearly 10 minutes straight. When that much of the seafloor displaces that quickly, the water above it has no choice. It moves too. In deep ocean water, a tsunami is almost invisible. The wave height at the surface might be less than a meter, but it travels at extraordinary speed, up to 800 kilometers per hour, roughly the cruising speed of a commercial aircraft. Ships at sea felt almost nothing. Pilots flying overhead saw nothing unusual. The wave was invisible, silent, and moving faster than most people can comprehend. The physics change completely when the wave reaches shallow water. As the ocean floor rises toward the coast, the tsunami slows down, but it does not lose energy. That energy has to go somewhere. It goes up. A wave that was barely detectable in deep water transforms into a wall of water that can reach 10, 20, 30 meters in height by the time it reaches the shore. In some locations along the Sumatran coast in 2004, the waves exceeded 30 meters. That is the height of a 10-story building. The first coast to be struck was Aceh province in northern Sumatra, the closest landmass to the epicenter. The time between the earthquake and the first wave was less than 30 minutes. In some areas, it was 15. There were no warning sirens. There were no emergency alerts. There was no system in place to communicate what had just happened beneath the ocean. People were still standing on the exposed seabed when the water returned. The waves that struck Banda Aceh, the provincial capital, reached heights of up to 30 meters in some neighborhoods. The destruction was total. Entire districts were flattened. The city's infrastructure, its roads, its bridges, its hospitals, was gone. More than 160,000 people died in Indonesia alone. In some coastal villages, there were no survivors at all. The wave did not stop at Sumatra. Traveling southwest across the Indian Ocean, it reached Sri Lanka approximately 2 hours after the earthquake. The island had no warning. Trains were running, markets were open, fishing boats were heading out for the morning catch. The waves that struck the eastern and southern coasts reached heights of up to 9 meters. Entire towns along the shoreline were destroyed. 68,000 people died. A train called the Queen of the Sea, carrying nearly 2,000 passengers along the coast, was swept from its tracks. It remains one of the deadliest rail disasters in history. At roughly the same time, waves struck the southern coast of India, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh. Fishing communities that had existed for generations were gone in minutes. Nearly 13,000 people died. In Thailand, the island of Khao Lak was particularly devastated. A popular resort destination, it was full of European tourists celebrating Christmas. The waves reached heights of 10 meters in some areas and traveled hundreds of meters inland. More than 5,000 people died in Thailand, including thousands of foreign visitors. The Maldives, barely a meter above sea level, was almost entirely inundated. By a remarkable piece of fortune, the geography of the atolls diffused some of the wave's energy, and the death toll, while tragic, was far lower than it might have been. 82 people died. 7 hours after the earthquake, the wave reached the eastern coast of Africa, Somalia, Kenya, Tanzania. The ocean that had been calm all morning suddenly surged inland without any explanation. Nearly 300 people died on a coastline more than 4,500 kilometers from where the earthquake had struck. One earthquake, 14 countries, 227,000 dead. The scale of the disaster was catastrophic, but it did not have to be that bad. For decades before 2004, scientists had known that the Sunda megathrust was one of the most dangerous fault systems on Earth. The geological record showed clear evidence of previous megathrust events in the region, earthquakes large enough to generate tsunamis comparable to the one that struck that morning. The risk was documented in scientific literature. It was known, but the Indian Ocean had no tsunami warning system. The Pacific Ocean had one. It was built in 1949, following a catastrophic tsunami that struck Hawaii in 1946, killing more than 150 people. That system had been upgraded and expanded over the following decades, adding buoys, sensors, and communication networks across the Pacific. It was not perfect, but it existed. Nobody had built the equivalent for the Indian Ocean. Warning systems require political will, international cooperation, and sustained funding. 14 countries would need to agree on protocols, share data in real time, and maintain the infrastructure indefinitely. Those conversations had never happened. When the earthquake struck at 0:58 on December 26th, scientists at the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center in Hawaii detected it within minutes. They ran the ITA calculations. The numbers were alarming. A tsunami was almost certainly in motion across the Indian Ocean. They began trying to contact authorities in the affected region. There were no direct lines. There were no pre-established protocols. Scientists were calling embassies. They were leaving messages. They were sending emails to addresses they were not sure anyone was monitoring on a public holiday. By the time any official warning reached any coastal authority with the power to act, the waves had already killed more than 100,000 people. On a beach in Phuket, Thailand, an 11-year-old British girl named Tilly Smith had recently studied tsunamis in a geography lesson at her school in Surrey. She recognized the signs, the strange behavior of the water, the way the sea was pulling back. She told her parents. Her parents told the beach. The beach was evacuated. Roughly 100 people survived because a child had paid attention in class. That one detail is the clearest possible illustration of how unprepared the world was. The knowledge that could have saved lives existed. It just was not in the right places. The international response to the 2004 tsunami was unlike anything the world had seen before. 110 countries contributed to relief efforts. More than $13 billion was pledged in humanitarian aid in the weeks following the disaster. Hundreds of thousands of aid workers, soldiers, and volunteers descended on the affected regions. The rebuilding of Aceh took years. The province, which had also been in the middle of a decades-long armed conflict between Indonesian government forces and separatist rebels, received an influx of resources that transformed it. Roads were built. Hospitals were constructed. Schools went up. The disaster, in a grim irony, also helped bring the conflict to an end. A peace agreement was signed in August 2005. Both sides had watched the same wave take the same lives. The war seemed smaller after that. Internationally, the pressure to build a warning system for the Indian Ocean was immediate and overwhelming. By 2006, the Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning and Mitigation System was operational. It now includes over 100 seismic monitoring stations, a network of deep ocean pressure sensors called DART buoys, and tide gauges across the entire basin. When a significant earthquake occurs, the system can generate an alert within 3 to 5 minutes. That is genuinely remarkable progress. It means that countries far from an earthquake's epicenter, Sri Lanka, India, Somalia, the Maldives, would today receive alerts with enough time to evacuate coastal areas. Simulations suggest that if the 2004 warning system had existed in 2004, tens of thousands of lives could have been saved. But the system has a limit that no amount of technology can overcome. For communities close to the epicenter of a major earthquake, there is simply no time. Banda Aceh had less than 30 minutes in 2004. In a worst-case scenario involving a shallow earthquake directly offshore, a coastal community might have 10 minutes, perhaps less. No alert, no siren, no text message travels faster than a fault rupture. By the time sensors detect the earthquake, the tsunami is already moving. By the time the alert is processed and transmitted, the wave may already be in shallow water. The only protection for those communities is not technology. It is instinct. It is knowledge so deeply embedded that it requires no alert, no instruction, no government notification. When the ground shakes and the water pulls back, you run. You do not wait. You do not take photographs. You do not go back for your belongings. You run to high ground. That kind of knowledge is built over generations, and it exists in some places. On the hillsides of Japan, in coastal villages that have been destroyed by tsunamis before, ancient stone tablets stand in the landscape. Some of them are centuries old. They carry inscriptions in Old Japanese warning future generations not to build homes below this line, not to trust the sea after an earthquake. Some of those tablets were placed there by survivors of the 1896 Meiji Sanriku tsunami, which killed more than 22,000 people. The people who placed those stones knew they would not live to see the next great wave. They placed them for people they would never meet. Some of those tablets were ignored. In the decades after World War II, as Japan modernized, many coastal communities built below the old warning lines. Land was valuable. The memory of the old tsunamis faded. The stones were still there, but fewer people were reading them. Then, 2011 happened. The Tohoku earthquake, magnitude 9.1. a tsunami that struck the northeastern coast of Japan with waves reaching 40.5 meters in some locations. Nearly 20,000 people died. The towns that had built below the old stone markers were among the hardest hit. The towns that had respected them fared better. In the Andaman Islands, something different happened in 2004. The indigenous communities of the archipelago, the Jarawa, the Onge, the Sentinelese, people who have lived in close relationship with the ocean for 50,000 years, survived almost entirely unharmed. They read the signs that thousands of tourists and residents with access to far more technology completely missed. Oral traditions, passed down across hundreds of generations, told them what unusual ocean behavior before an earthquake meant. They moved inland. They survived 50,000 years of accumulated knowledge versus a modern resort with Wi-Fi. The ancient communities did better. So, could it happen again? The answer is not a possibility. It is a certainty. The Sunda megathrust did not release all of its stress in 2004. The section that ruptured was roughly 1,200 kilometers long. The full fault system is considerably longer. Geologists have identified multiple segments that remain locked, that have not ruptured in modern recorded history, and that are accumulating stress at the same relentless pace as the section that broke in 2004. The question is not whether another major earthquake will strike the region. The question is when and how large. And the Sunda megathrust is not alone. The Cascadia subduction zone runs along the western coast of North America, from Northern California through Oregon and Washington, up into British Columbia. It has not produced a major rupture since January 26, 1700, when an earthquake estimated at magnitude 9 generated a tsunami that struck the coasts of Japan with no warning. Scientists studying the geological record believe Cascadia is capable of producing an earthquake of magnitude 9 or greater. The coastal cities of Seattle, Portland, and Vancouver sit within the potential impact zone of the tsunami that would follow. The Alaska Aleutian subduction zone, the Chile Trench, the Nankai Trough off the coast of Japan. These are not theoretical risks. They are active fault systems, loaded with stress, that have produced catastrophic earthquakes before and will do so again. The warning systems that exist today are better than anything that existed in 2004. That is real, meaningful progress. In the event of a major earthquake in the Indian Ocean, countries far from the epicenter would receive warnings in time to evacuate. Lives that would have been lost in 2004 will be saved next time. But for the communities closest to the fault, the ones who would have less than 20 minutes, those warning systems will not be enough. For them, survival depends on something that no satellite can provide. It depends on a 10-year-old who paid attention in geography class. It depends on a stone tablet on a hillside that someone decided not to ignore. It depends on a grandmother who told her grandchildren what to do when the sea pulls back. 227,000 people died on a Tuesday morning because the ground moved and the world was not ready. The ground will move again. It always does. The stress is still building beneath the Indian Ocean, beneath the Pacific Northwest, beneath the coasts of Japan and Chile and Alaska. The fault lines that produced the deadliest disasters in human history are not finished. They are simply waiting. The warning systems are better now. The evacuation routes are marked. The drills are run. The buoys are in the water. But the ocean does not care about any of that. It does not negotiate. It does not wait for infrastructure to be upgraded, or for political agreements to be finalized, or for people to stop building on floodplains, because the land is cheap. It simply moves. And when it does, the only things that will matter are the ones that were already in place, long before the ground started shaking. The knowledge, the instinct, the memory carved into stone by people who understood that the sea has no mercy, and that the only protection is to never forget what it is capable of. The tablets are still standing on those hillsides. They have been there for centuries. The question is whether enough people are still reading them. If you want more breakdowns like this one, consider subscribing. Now, back to December 26th.